There's a lot of anecdotal advice around on improving your marriage. But if you want something you can really use that will actually make a difference and reignite your marriage, check out the link in the description below.
The question, what does falling out of love feel like? Answer by Christine Bourhab. It's as quick and painful as falling in love. Let me tell you about Brian. I met him in 7th grade. He was a good friend of my older brother and teased me and my friends mercilessly. He liked to steal our flip phones and text random people in our contact lists, take ridiculous selfies and set one as a screensaver, or Chang'e the language to Mandarin Chinese and watch us try to figure out how to change it back. We played that slapping game in line for rides at Six Flags and he slapped us till our hands were red and burning. He pulled chairs out from under us and laughed when our ass bones broke. Annoying as hell, as most 14-year-old boys are. Fast forward to 10th grade. Freshly 16-year-old me arrived at a casual high school dance wearing a short dress and Converse, bangs straightened, purple eyeshadow. Maybe it was the spring air. Or the fact that my sister had just gotten engaged. Maybe all the stars had aligned just right that day. But I stepped out of the car, and there was annoying old 18-year-old Brian and he suddenly looked cute. Wait, what? Brian cute? He had just gotten a haircut. Had it all chopped off. The way military guys get their hair cut. He was in the process of joining the Marines, and the haircut made him look sexy. Sexy as fuck. So that was me falling in love. I loved Brian relentlessly for nearly a year. In April, a few weeks after my "oh my gosh I'm attracted to my brother's best friend" epiphany, he got on one knee and opened a ring box for me. The box held a note that read "Prom." Prom with Brian was my first real date, and the entire evening was a dream. But even though we continued to hang out in groups as friends, he never actually asked me out again. He seemed to treat me differently whenever we hung out with other people. Found silly excuses to touch me, went out of his way to talk. His annoying teasing turned suddenly cute and flirty. I overthought everything he said or did, wondering what it meant. I knew there were other GRLs in his friend group that had crushes on him like this chick Autumn, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some sort of chemistry between us that we shared with no one else. When he looked at me, it felt like he was peering into my soul. I thought he could feel it too. After a blissful summer full of flirting that went nowhere and a boatload of sexual tension, Brian left for the Marines. I was one of the 4 people, besides his family, that went to see him swear in and hug him goodbye. My heart was so emotionally overwhelmed it didn't know how to process my feelings of sadness, loneliness, and longing, so at first I didn't cry, and when I finally found my tears several weeks after he left it was all out wailing. I wrote him a letter every week he was gone. I could have written one every day, but figured that'd be too much. He only replied once, which made sense to me, because I knew he was so busy at boot camp and a lot of people were reaching out to him. I treasured that letter, memorized it word for word, stained it with my tears, slept with it under my pillow. It was all I had of him for 12 weeks, and I'd sooner give you my right arm than that letter. December rolled around and, knowing his departure from boot camp was nearing and that he would be home soon, I wrote him a final letter. I poured my heart out to Brian. Told him how much he meant to me. How I couldn't imagine life without him. I never came out and said I liked him, you know, like that. I didn't want it to happen like that, over a letter. I just wanted him to know how much I loved him, genuinely, how much I cared for him, how much his cheesy grin and relentless teasing throughout the last 5 years had changed me. I sealed it and sent it off, and waited for him to come home. December 22nd I think it was. I stood in the airport with this crowd of our friends, jittery with excitement and anticipation just at seeing that adorable grin, feeling his warm hug. When I saw him walk through those airport doors I started cheering, unable to wipe the grin off my face. When Autumn rushed forward, into Brian's open arms, and they shared the cinematic, classic soldier home from war movie quality kiss. Everyone cheered harder. My grin disappeared, then reappeared, and for the rest of the night, it stayed plastered on my face, faker than if it had been painted there. As I hugged Brian and watched him walk around with his arm around Autumn and tell us all stories of boot camp. I had given up ice cream for this man, knowing he wouldn't get any at boot camp. I wrote Semper Fi on the back of my hand every morning and at the top of every test or homework assignment as a public declaration of my loyalty. I wrote this man dozens of letters, many of them tear-stained and hidden under my bed, never to bed read by any eyes but my own. At my darkest, loneliest moments, I imagined a life with Brian. I imagined us confessing our undying love for one another once he returned, a simple white wedding, and a life traveling the world and eventually having beautiful blue-eyed babies together. And all the while he was sexting Autumn over snail mail. I felt incredibly foolish, embarrassed, humiliated. I cried a lot. On Christmas Eve the happy couple made it Facebook official. I cried some more. But you know what? I fell out of it. It was quick and painful as fuck, but as quickly as I fell in, I fell out. I decided if the feeling wasn't mutual, the feeling was a waste of my damn time. So I fell out of it. Sometime after New Year's, Brian and Autumn thought a couple's photo shoot and posted their dreamy pictures on Facebook. I flipped through them, thought, aw, cute, and scrolled through. My heart had done a complete 180. Brian was stationed on the East Coast and left 2 weeks after that fatal day in the airport, and he and Autumn lasted a few months before breaking up. Then he started dating this other chick and they were married soon after. By the time he was married I was dating my future husband, my soulmate. The last time I saw Brian was at his going away party before his first overseas employment. I made the drive from Kansas City alone. My husband was working, and he was happy to see me, joked how he wanted to meet my husband to make sure he was a good guy. He was always very protective of me and my friends. I assured him he was. Last I heard he and his wife were divorced and he spends his time drinking, visiting clubs in Vegas and working out with the guys. Not bashing that lifestyle, but not exactly husband material. I'm so happy things didn't work out with him and that I found my other half. Brian may have been my first love, but he wasn't my true love. Answer by Melinda Gwynn. Very strange. When you are in love with someone, their virtues feel like the most important traits in the world, and thus their possession of those traits is remarkable, incredible, mind-blowingly awe-inspiring. Everyone has traits marked enough to be loved like this, and it doesn't actually matter what virtues are involved. For each love, they will differ. Still, while in love, they will feel like the most laudable traits any human being could ever possess. Irreplaceable, unworthy of being compared to any other strength a man or woman could possess. That person, in consequence, becomes terribly important. You want to bathe in their presence. Do you want to be around, integrate, and emulate those virtues? They become your joy, becoming more like them becomes your joy, and seeing them come into your world in turn, with a similar irresistible magnetism, is equally enjoyable. Both people, in this union, become more and better than they were before. Edges smoothed, weaknesses bolstered, and flaws sublimated thanks to the overwhelming compulsion of love. For each person, the beauty and goodness of their lover serves as a guiding light to the greatest self each of them can be individually. Seeing that level of perfection in another human being encourages greater striving towards personal perfection, much as communion with a deity is rumored to accomplish, and this glimpse of the ideal on earth makes a limited portion of perfection seem, in those moments, to be attainable. Love, therefore, is not only a function of how the lover sees their beloved, but also impacts how the lover perceives themselves and the potential for virtue and goodness inherent in the world itself. After all, your beloved, who is so magnificent, who is so admirable, is real. Enthrallment of this nature can last for decades in cases where the love is unrequited, but has been rumored rarely to exceed 18 months duration in cases of requited love. Often, it fades sooner than that. Biologically, its function seems to be to encourage closeness between two individuals for long enough to conceive and give birth to a child, after which point continued infatuation with each other would prove evolutionarily disadvantageous, as attention that they had given to each other must, after childbirth, be given to the new life they made together. The new perfect person is, of course, the child, and their mutual bonding with that child makes their continued attraction to each other superfluous. A common goal exists, a common and beloved goal exists, which is enough to keep those two people working with each other in support of that goal. What happens when romantic love, as described here, ends? What happens when the timer runs out, and the lovers return from the stars? That depends. Even had it be the case that love ran out for a person who I loved intensely as a friend. That was a jarring experience, but not fundamentally confusing. I continued to find her extremely admirable, but the sense of unreal perfection I had formerly attributed from her vanished. Suddenly she felt like another friend. Her imperfections were as important and noticeable as her perfections, her flaws as real and vivid as her virtues. My view of her, in short, returned to the balanced perception of a normal human being that I held before I lost my wits and fell in love. A worthy and lovely human being, to be certain, but far from the epitome of virtue and excellence that I had seen before. The need to be near her, to know her every thought, to learn how to be as wonderful as she was to me had vanished. I continued to like, even to love her in a friendly sense, but the distance and autonomy I desired with my other friends I suddenly desired with her as well. My view of the world also shifted, as I no longer held her particular virtues in such high esteem. They were demoted to the same value as other admirable traits people hold. While this caused the world itself to be stripped of her superhuman beauty, it also allowed me to appreciate the many and varied forms of beauty and goodness that could be found elsewhere, albeit in more modest manifestations than I saw while subject to the tonic of love. The shift felt strange, like I had awoken from a long and consuming spell. Suddenly the world was brighter for my love of her growing dim, and my understanding of how I had been transfixed by her shifted from emotional to intellectual. I remember what I saw in her. I still see it. But somehow, as though a switch was, at long last, flipped, I could no longer feel it. I returned to myself, with my own virtues and values at the fore. She is a friend, and loved in the manner of friendship. I have also fallen out of love with a person whom I had fallen in love with far too fast and hard to form a friendship with first. Most of that experience was the same. The devaluation of his virtues, the remembrance of other virtues, the sudden importance given to flaws whose existence I had formerly only noted intellectually, and the removal of the pretty shiny allure were quick and painless. A relief, to be honest. Even ever enjoyed being infatuated. While infatuated, I always have the maddening sensation that one day I'll come to my senses, and I won't know quite what I'm getting until I do. But this time there was a very strange sensation when the love wore off. When I saw him, when I talked to him, there was a new person before me. I knew who he was, but it felt like a person I had never seen before. As this person was new, he felt strange and different, incomprehensible and puzzling. There was no friendship clove to fall back upon. Instead there was a person who was no longer venerated, and needed to be interacted with and assessed in an entirely new, unanticipated way. Once again, I knew what I had seen in him, but I no longer felt it. But this time, no other feeling was left either. Emotionally, interacting felt the same as communicating with a stranger. And that is very, very strange to feel when the beginning is all-consuming, passionate adoration. It felt like the center of my world was taken away, and replaced with nothing at all. There was a queasy disorientation coupled with a bewildered sadness, as the center of my heart was revealed to be hollow. I thought it was keeping me alive, but it was as ephemeral as air. It's disorienting. Falling out of love is disorienting. Answer by Maria Faruqi. So, he left. And now you need to fall out of love. In the beginning, you wake up around 9 a.m. on a summer morning, and the first thing you do is put on layers of mascara, the kind that washes away with water. Why? Because it'll help you to hold yourself together, and not spend the day crying. You know mascara makes your tears very noticeable. You sit down to have dinner with your family. Gotta act like everything is fine. In not falling apart. In not. But then someone makes a small joke at your expense, and that's it. You've had it. You storm off to your room. Your family wonders why you're so irritable. She's stressed because of school, they say. No one asks if you're okay, and it makes you feel both grateful and disappointed. A few months go by. You're busy with your everyday life. You've got things to do. But every now and then, there comes along a night that makes you feel especially lonely. A particular song that reminds you of how things were, and you compare that with how things are now, and you marvel at all the changes. You miss him, you ache, and in moments of weakness, you wish he would come back. But mostly, when you cry, it's not because you need him, but it's because you realize that you will be okay without him. And a slow and painful year later, you look back, and you're amazed at how there was a time when you could not comprehend how you would live if he were to leave. But he left, and you survived. Of course, it never fully leaves you. It haunts. You put on that outfit. Black top, blue jeans. And you are inevitably reminded of when you wore the same outfit, at a time when things were different. You hear the song that used to be his favorite, and it hurts a little, but you can't bring yourself to delete that song off of your playlist. A certain kind of weather reminds you of him. Some inside jokes. Some books, some movies, some colors. So many things remind you of him. And the haunting continues. The nostalgia is overpowering some days, but deep down inside, you know that you are better off without him. Picture credits, phone gallery.